everyone. It's Taylor. Welcome to episode 3, part 1, where I talk about Pocahontas and John Smith. I don't know if he really deserves to be talked about, but it's a pretty tragic story all around. Definitely not a happy ending. So that's, I guess, the big question is, was she happy? My guess is no, but I don't know. I don't want to speak for her. So hope you enjoy, and I'll see you on the other side.
In the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA096.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
Welcome to Doomed to Fail, the podcast where we have to come up with signature drinks to temper down how sad we are about the stories that we're about to tell you. I'm Fars, joined here by Taylor, and every week we'll be bringing you two tales, one historic and one true crime, related to relationships that were doomed to fail. What's our signature drink this week, Taylor?
So thank you, Fars. So today our alcoholic drink is a Mai Tai. What is in a Mai Tai, Fars? It's like it sounds tropical. Papaya?
It is tropical. So Mai Tai typically contains aged agricole, whatever that is,
Cool.
rum, Creole shroom lime. Yeah, I'm reading off of a very, very old and outdated Mai Tai recipe. So,
I'm thinking
listeners,
rum. That I feel like a pina colada-ish kind of thing.
a happy drink. It's a happy
Okay.
drink for a very unhappy story.
Okay. Okay. And then for our non-alcoholic drink, we'll be drinking just the colors of the wind. So just stand outside and let the wind hit you. Um, that is
Love it.
our non-alcoholic drink. First, do you want to tell us who you're talking about, and then I'll go into mine?
I am going to be discussing the Anthony Tote family murders.
Very excited. I'm drinking my White Claw. I'm very excited because I don't know what that is. I haven't heard that before. Before we get there, I'm going to talk about the tragic story of Pocahontas and her husband, John Rolfe, which is a relationship that ultimately led to her death at a very, very young age. So,
Taylor,
yeah.
you don't know this yet, but our stories have a very unusual overlap,
Oh my God, I'm so excited.
which I'll disclose to you after I get to my story. But yes, very interesting that you picked Pocahontas.
Cool. Okay, that's awesome. I'm happy to hear that. Because I don't know, that's cool. It's like we planned it. Um, so I got some of this information from the internet, nps.gov, Smithsonian Magazine, History Channel, and I listened to the podcast, A Short History of Pocahontas as well. So I also listened to our first episode and I want to try to say less. So I'm going to work on that. That's my growth edge in this episode. I wanted to do far as something Texan because we're in Texas together, and usually I'm in California and you're in Texas, but we're in the same house, even though we're in different rooms. And I'm super excited that we're together. So last minute, I decided to look up Stephen F. Austin and see if he had any like relationship stuff, but he was just a piece of shit who wasn't married. And I just someday maybe I'll talk about the history of Texas, but the history of Texas is a history of white people who wanted to leave America so they could have slaves, and Mexico being like, absolutely not, you cannot have slaves here, and white people fighting to have slaves. So every town named after a white man in Texas is named after a piece of shit. Um,
Lovely.
you, yeah, the things that Stephen F. Austin said about slaves and slavery and enslaved people are disgusting. He was a bad guy and he died young without any love. So at least he
And
did
and
have
that
a little
was
love.
and that was our 2 minute Texas history lesson as we discuss Pocahontas today.
So then I was thinking about colonizers. So I wanted to talk about the most famous woman indigenous to North America, and that's Pocahontas. And we'll talk about her and her second husband, John Rolfe, who was totally complicit in her death because he took a person to Europe who had never been there. And so we know that that's obviously going to kill someone of some disease. So for Pocahontas, this is a bananas time to be alive. She's born into a world that's dramatically different from the one that she dies in. And far as I want to you to stop me and to stop at points to think about what was she thinking? Like, was she happy? Like, as things are changing and things are like, going crazy in her world, was she excited? What would it have been like for, a person sort of watching like this alien civilization come in and try to take over? So this is like a time. this time and every time before, like now, you didn't know about what was going on in the rest of the world. So people you've never seen before could walk into your neighborhood and be like, "Hello, we're here to like, we're the Mongols. We're here to colonize you. We're the Romans. We're the blah blah blah." And you've never seen them before, and you don't have any idea how big the world is. So I think that's crazy.
I think the expectation when if you were alive at that point is that you and anybody you know can die at any point in time by anybody, and you have no idea, like to your point, how big the world is and who could show up at your doorstep and say, "Now we own you."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Um,
Terrifying.
Terrifying, just absolutely crazy. So just imagine if like aliens came down today and they started to try to learn our language and that was all happening. That's pretty much the same thing that was happening to Pocahontas. So she was born around 1596, and her name, a couple different names that she may have had, and oh my God, I apologize to the indigenous people of the United States of America and everywhere in the world for the way I'm going to pronounce some of these things in this episode. But she was born Meotoka or Amonute. So those maybe those names. So Pocahontas is sort of her nickname, and it means like playful little fun thing. So that's her like cute nickname she got when she was a kid. Her dad was Chief Powhatan of the Powhatan Nation, which is part of the Algonquin Nation, and all over like they were in Virginia and that part of America. And she was born to one of his many wives. So he had several wives, and there's not really a lot of information about her mother. So she may have died in childbirth, but she was like one of 26 siblings to her dad, Chief Powhatan. So
26 siblings.
yeah, but it's different ladies, so hopefully they didn't nobody had like 20 of them or something, but
Yeah, it'll
yeah,
be a rough
there's a
couple
lot
of
of them.
years.
But it's kind of like a communal living kind of thing. So she just kind of goes back to the village where her mom lived, and then the dad goes around to other villages and has his other families there. So like good for him. He gets to move around. And the legend is that she was her father's favorite, but like I feel like we made that up because of what we how we want to put her into our history. But they said that she was her dad's favorite. And it was nice. Like it was kind of a war-torn place. Like they were always trying to conquer other villages and like expand their areas, but it was fine. And everyone worked all the time, but there was a lot of music, and the women learned how to build houses and do the gathering. So women actually had a really like not a terrible place in the society. They had jobs and they were able to choose who they married, and they could get divorced. So divorce was like very popular, not popular, but like common because they wouldn't want like no one wants that couple who's fighting all the time living in town. It was just
I,
like,
I
God, just
feel I
separate.
feel like that was a pointed dig at me.
It was not. I'm just saying that, like, if you're not having a good time, get divorced. It's fine. So
Amen.
don't kill your spouse. This is a big rule that a big thing that we'll come back to over and over again. But so that's all allowed. So it's a pretty it's a decent life. People didn't really wear a lot of clothes. It was still pretty like primitive, but they were expanding and all of that. So all of a sudden these ships start coming in to do reconnaissance. So this is the like imagine the ship coming down from space moment, and people come out and kind of look around and then go back. So they know that there's something else out there and there's something else coming, but they don't know much about them yet. And this is happening when she's a little girl. So all of a sudden, a ship comes and they stay. And the one that stays creates a colony, and it's Jamestown. So, what do you, far as a person who grew up in America, know about Jamestown on the spot?
Yeah. So I'm trying to go back. That's the town that Lucy's character in I Love Lucy is from. She's from Jamestown in the show.
Is it really? Oh my God, it's
Yeah,
amazing.
it really is. She was Lucy McGillicuddy then. But I also vaguely remember that was one of the first colonies that was settled in the U.S. It's not Roanoke. It's not the one. It was not
No,
the crazy one where people just disappeared overnight. But it was like it was. I feel like
it's the
it's
same
somewhat
time.
related. Same
Yeah,
timeline. Yeah,
absolutely.
exactly. That's mostly what I know about it.
Perfect. Yes. So, yeah, Roanoke was the one where they like disappeared, but probably just went out to get food and became part of the tribes. But yeah, Jamestown's the same time, the same type of people. They came from England. They came in 1607. So remember, Pocahontas was born in 1596, so she's like almost 10 or 10. And they found this land in this area and they were like, oh, it's a peninsula, it can be protected, this is a great place to like build a fort and put up walls and do all these things. And the reason that the Powhatans didn't live there is because it was a bad place to live. It could be defended, but the land was terrible, there were tons of bugs, you couldn't drink the water, and it was just a terrible place to build a town. And
Taylor, can I interrupt you real quick?
of course.
Are you saying, like, how do you spell Powhatan?
Oh, great question, because I had to look up how to pronounce it. I'm saying Powhatan. And the way I wrote it after looking it up is Powhatan.
Do you know what that word means in the native language?
No, do you?
No.
Then
I'm
what do you
I'm
say?
I'm derailing for no reason. The reason I
No,
asked
I'm
is
super.
because there's a
I'm excited.
tribe in Brazil that's called Powhatan
Oh,
that is a it's like it's a warrior tribe basically, and I've recently learned about this, and that's why I brought it up because I was like, is there potential, like maybe like some people left the Americas and went down south, or I don't know. I just thought maybe they're tangentially related, but probably not.
no, they totally could be because it was so the Powhatan's a part of the Virginia Algonquin. Now I went to Wikipedia to look at this. But they also, that was also like the name of Pocahontas's dad and the name of the language. So it's like a word that's used for a lot of different things. So I think it's possible. Some survivors relocated elsewhere, but I think it's mostly North America.
I'll stop derailing.
Okay. I mean, we could look it up later.
And then
It's
edit it in, and
possible.
then no, and
Shit, I
then
don't
all
know.
this goes away, and nobody knows that we had this conversation. I love
No,
that.
no, this is perfect. Keep it in. So I lost where I was. Okay. So the colonizers are in Jamestown and it sucks. There's no way to get food. There's no way to get water. People are dying. There's like the rumor is obviously that they resorted to eating each other because they were starving. Like two-thirds of them died before they got any help. So it's a terrible time to be a colonizer. They're only on this little peninsula and things are really bad. So they thought that they would be able to offer goods to the Powhatan for food. So it'd be like, oh, I have this jacket or whatever and like try to trade it for food. But there actually isn't any extra food because it was a bad time for them also. So it was just like a shitty crop year or whatever. And they didn't really have extra food. So they weren't like full on like hunter gatherers. They did do some growing crops and that sort of thing, but they rotated their crops, which is something that like I like to yell about in other places as well, because a lot of white people came to America and they were like, looked at the indigenous people and they were like, you guys are so dumb. You could be growing so much more if you just planted all the land, ignoring the fact that for thousands of years, these people have been rotating their crops to make sure the land is good. So of course, that leads to things like the Dust Bowl and things in like America that when all the land like goes to shit because white people weren't paying attention to the way people have been doing it for thousands of years.
So crop rotation is essentially let the land rest,
Mhm.
let half the land rest, plant in the other half, and then
Mhm.
when that's done, let that rest and plant the other half.
Exactly,
Cool.
exactly. And so, like in Oklahoma, when the Dust Bowl happened, what had happened was all of the native grasses that would grow on the land during the rotation time stopped growing, and that held the land together. And then it was just like dust and sand. So that's why like it was uninhabitable after a couple of years.
Taylor, again, sidetracking here at my old house in LA. You know how we had that backyard and there was just like grass, it was just overrun in the backyard and it sloped all the
Hmm.
way down. I
Hmm.
hired someone to mow that grass and I was out of town and my ex sent me a picture of what they had done when she saw it. Hours later, they had ripped out all the grass. Like there was nothing there but just dirt. And I immediately thought of the Dust Bowl and was like, holy shit, the entire side of this hill is going to go crashing down. Luckily, I didn't, but that was my first inclination when I saw that.
No, totally. Time will tell of the next earthquake how that house goes. Yeah, exactly. You can't rip everything out by the roots and expect it to be the same stable place. Totally. Um, so anyway, so there's not enough food for them, so they're not sharing it with the people in Jamestown, and also the people in Jamestown owe money back to England because they like borrowed money to come out to the New World. So they're supposed to be bringing things back to England, and they're not because they don't have anything. So they're stuck in their road. I wrote, now they're stuck in their fort because they're assholes and they keep leaving and trying to steal things because they can't get anything by trade or by like normal means. And so they're trying to make a pact and they can't figure it out. And things are super tense because obviously, like, even though the colonizers have less people and they're all super sick, they also have like guns. And so a little bit more intense military power than the Powhatans have. So that balance is still not like fair. Um, so one thing they did that I think was actually really cool is they sent kids to each other's like villages to learn the language, which totally makes sense. Because like if you sent me to a Powhatan village, I'd be like, I don't know what to do. But if you sent like a 3-year-old who's already learning language to that place, they'd be able to learn it a lot easier, right?
Makes sense. Yeah.
So the English sent a boy, one of the boys, his name was Thomas Savage, and he moved in and learned the language. And they said, and one thing I read, it said that Pocahontas was sent to Jamestown to learn English, but and every other thing else, they always sent boys. So I don't know if they really would have sent her, but whatever. Either way, she learns how to speak English. So it starts with the kids learn how to speak English. Just like now, if someone moves to America, usually the kids learn how to speak English like before the parents do.
Nice.
So who is the person that you would think that Pocahontas was married to?
The blonde long haired dude in that movie.
Yes. Do you remember his name?
It had to be John Smith, right?
It's John Smith. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So John Smith is one of a number of colonizers, and he goes out to in this like old group to find supplies. Like they said he literally drew the short straw and goes out there, and everyone in his group gets killed, and then they're like about to kill him, and Pocahontas like jumps in front of him and says, "No, don't kill him. Let's be peaceful and nice," which is probably not true. And she was 10, and when this happened. And John Smith then later writes a book and says, she jumped in front of them and she wouldn't let them kill me. And then we totally fell in love. And you're like, ew, she's 10. And then later he's like, oh, no, she was 13, which is still
I
gross.
mean, it's
And
not that much better.
no, but neither of those things happened. Like they did not fall in love at any point. And like, who knows if she actually really saved him, but he does survive. And now like he's like talked about her and he romanticizes his relationship with her his whole life. Like not like sexually romanticizes them the whole time, but is very much like this is like showing people that like the savages are have humanity and blah blah blah. He like talks about her a lot and really like exploits their relationship.
What to
Um,
what benefit?
to like say to like sell books, honestly, for him to go back and like sell books about his time in the colonies.
Okay.
Yeah.
Common thread between our stories number two. I'll point that out to you later.
Oh my God, I'm excited. So none of that's true, but whatever. She did meet John Smith. And then she starts to, she's actually is growing up. She does become like a teenager. And in this time, you can actually picture her a lot like the movie, like the clothes that a young woman would wear. Like, I mean, like the cartoon, the young woman would wear is like that one shoulder dress. I don't know if you remember. And she started to get tattoos and like that kind of thing. Like, she's starting to kind of grow up. And then for a couple years, she's kind of off the map. But I feel like, did you watch the cartoon? I feel like I should have prepped you and had you watch this cartoon before we started.
I haven't seen it in so many years that I might as well have not seen it by this point.
Okay, so there's a whole part of her song in the cartoon where she's talking about how her dad wants her to marry this guy and she doesn't know if she wants to marry him, blah blah blah. And his name is Cocoam. And I think this is the biggest shocker to me in this whole freaking story is that she really was married to Cocoam, which is it like what I don't even have words because I wrote down is like that plot point in the movie is very, very stressful. And it was for me. I'm imagining for like 70 to 80% of kids who watch the movie because Cocoam is like in the Pocahontas cartoon. He is the first person that I ever saw with chest tattoos. And I was like, yes, you should marry him. What are you talking about? He was like imagine like if they did a live version of this movie, Cocoam would be Jason Momoa, and there would be a global emergency because everyone who watched the movie would get pregnant who started watching the movie.
That is solid casting. That would be really
Yeah.
solid casting. I like
Yeah.
that.
So that's who Kocoum is, I think, in the zeitgeist of like young people who watched Pocahontas of a certain age. But she did marry him, and all evidence is that they were in love. Like she was allowed to choose who she got to marry. He was like in the military, but not necessarily like like a the best warrior or anything. It just seems that she likes him. And they get married. They may have had a daughter, but we don't really know. And then he kind of disappears out of her story. So they could have gotten divorced, which is totally fine, or he might have died. Either way, they're not married forever, but they are married when she's like a young woman and he's like a young man.
The
So
way
she does
you
have a first marriage.
the way you describe him, he does seem like a risk taker. Like he would have a Harley and also not wear a helmet, you know?
Yeah. Hmm. Hmm.
It was probably a boar. I don't know why. I just think he like got gored by a wild boar. That feels plausible for that time.
No, I definitely think that may be true. Like he died in like a big hunting trip or doing something like super hot and heroic. It's how we're gonna
Yes.
lose Jason Momoa and how we lost Coco. Exactly. Exactly. Um, so she's, kind of living her life. She's married. She's hanging out. There's still kind of this tense thing that obviously the Jamestown people are still there, and they really, really want to make more trade and kind of do more stuff with the Powhatans. So one of her jerk friends says, "Oh, there's a new boat at the shore. We have to go see it." And she's like, "I don't want to go." And they're like, "You have to come with us." And they go. And then like her friend is like, "Oh, I really want to go on board. Come with me, meh." And so she goes and they eat like dinner. And then Pocahontas is like, "Something's weird." And of course, something's weird. Her friend sold her out and she gets kidnapped. So she's kidnapped onto this boat. They lock her in a room and are trying to like get ransom from her dad. And she's out there for a full year. She's kidnapped by the white people, and she's in Jamestown and like a town next to it. And now there's like a full-on war. Her dad kind of concedes, but like not really. So there's like a whole bunch of stuff going on. It's not great. So this is like worst case for Jamestown because they're not getting any help from the natives. They're not getting any resources, and they're trying to like they're really instigating things by having Pocahontas. So she's there for a year, and guess what they try to do to her while she's there?
I mean, I can imagine.
It's not like a physical thing, a mental thing.
They make her a goddess.
No, they convert her to Christianity.
Of course. It's so stupid. I mean, come on, obviously. Of course, that's the first thing you do.
Of course. So, like, of course, what they want to do is save the heathens and they want to fucking save Pocahontas from, her beautiful life. And they convert her to Christianity and they not guess what they name her, you're never gonna guess, but they name her Rebecca. And like
Ugh.
I know. And I know a Rebecca who I like a lot. I know there are Rebeccas. It's a beautiful name, but like, come on, her name's Pocahontas. She's like this like amazing, like trailblazing woman, and you named her Rebecca and made her and baptized her. Ugh,
It's basic shit.
so basic. So now her name's Rebecca, and this is where she meets her second husband, John Rolfe, and this is where there are red flags that I will point out for you for this marriage. So she's 17, which is like old hat by now because she's already like had a baby and been married, probably had a baby. He's 27. I feel like that's maybe okay in this time. Here's what's not okay. She had to convert first to Christianity. And then he like wrote like a letter to the governor of the area that was like, I need permission to marry this heathen. I'm so torn because she's like super hot, but also she's a heathen, essentially. Like, fuck you, dude.
I mean, yeah, I like to think of things within the time frame in which they happen, and maybe that was like you had to do that
Yeah, that's
legally to
fair.
make it binding.
Fine.
Maybe you
Yeah,
didn't have a choice. I mean, I'd probably not call my wife a heathen, although maybe heathen had a different connotation back then than it does now.
it doesn't. No.
Okay, then that's a
Um,
bad thing to call your wife.
but so he's like, it's his second marriage as well. He's a widower and he's a tobacco farmer. He has a plantation. He may have stolen tobacco seeds from the Spanish and brought them to Virginia. So to get like the good tobacco in America, which obviously like starts a whole thing. And they're married on April 5th, 1614. And they have a son in January the next year. And then did you see this thing on the news this week about how Edward Norton is a direct descendant of hers?
Wait, I thought it was something else. Oh yeah, you're right. He is the right descendant of her. That's crazy.
Yeah, and that's from this son that she had. So his name is Thomas Rolfe. And so from Thomas, we get Edward Norton, which is fun. Um, and so now Pocahontas is living on a goddamn tobacco plantation with other indigenous people, essentially like working the land for them. But by all accounts, she's happy. She's just like this like Christian woman on this plantation, like living in a house named Rebecca. Um, and this time is called the Peace of Pocahontas. It's 9 years of peace between the white people and the indigenous people. So this is a part where I'm like, I don't know, is she happy? Like, could she be happy? Is she like
I mean, yeah, what is Pocahontas? What does her status have to do with there being this peace?
because she's like the favorite daughter of the chief and she's been someone who's gone like back and forth and like met a lot of the people on the in like in Jamestown. She can communicate really well. And I think also that she was converted to Christianity is a big part of it too, because then she's like, showing that they can be saved and all these things. And then
Got
they're
it.
like, we don't want to ruffle any feathers, whether that was, I didn't mean that. That was not a pun, but they didn't want to like, do anything weird where she would get like killed. So it was just like a tense piece, but a piece. And then at the end of this time, the King of England wants to see her and wants to meet her and asks her and John to come to England. So they take their son and they go to England, to London. They go to parties and balls and they concerts and they meet the king and all this stuff. And so she's really just like there. And this is where we get like the one engraving of her and it's engraving and we'll put it on our socials, but she, you know, is wearing like colonial garb, like the whole thing, and looks like a colonial person. It's wild. And the other crazy thing that happens while she's there is she meets John Smith again, and she thought he was dead, just like assumed he was dead because it had been like I don't know 10 years since she'd met him, and he's there, and there's a whole bunch of different accounts on what happens. But fucking John Smith, he writes that she was yelling at him as like a spurned lover would yell at someone, like blah blah blah. Other people are like she was yelling at him because he's a piece of shit, and she was saying you Englishmen lie to him like over and over again when she was yelling at him. But he's like, oh yeah, she's just like jealous. She still loves me, blah blah blah, because he's a jerk. And another thing that people say is that she also may have tried to call him father because he had that like she saw him as like an older person, and he was upset about that because he told everybody that they were dating.
I'm kind of with John on this one.
That shouldn't have called him father.
No, that she probably was still into him because, like,
She was never into him.
because
John
why would you care so much? Like, if I went into someone that I dated like 5 years ago, I'm not gonna be. I don't care what you do or like, why would I? Why would I have emotional attachment to that person unless I actually was still into them?
No, they did not date. She was 10 when they met, and he was a grown man. They did not date. He
Well,
told
that's true.
everybody
Was
that they dated.
she could have been 13.
Fine. He told everybody that they dated, and they did not. And then he was using that to like excuse that she was yelling at him. But I feel like she was, if anything, I would hope that she was yelling at him and being like, "Look what you did, you little jerk,"
Yeah,
like
fair enough.
to my people. Um, but who knows? Like we have no firsthand accounts from her and what her life was like. But her life was so short. So, she moved to a suburb of London and it's gross. London is gross. Like London is like there's no, again, sticky, no running water, like there's no air. Like there's one account where she's like in a carriage and she's like holding a handkerchief over her face because she can like barely breathe because she's used to being in these beautiful forests with fresh air and fresh water and all these things. And now she's in freaking London where it's disgusting. And so she's just like not having a good time. And she finally gets to go home and they get on a boat. She's 21 years old and they don't even leave like the area. She dies before they even get to leave. She dies of a disease on the boat. It could be anything like, you know, smallpox, any like diphtheria, any of those terrible diseases that you get when you're a person who hasn't been exposed to them. So she got a disease, or anyone really, because they're like everywhere. She got a disease. They take her body back to England and she's buried in England. They said her last words were, "All must die, but 'tis enough that my child liveth." So her son Thomas stayed in England, came back to America in 1635, tried to find his Powhatan family, and he was like a little bit successful possibly, but then he moved back and John Rolfe got married again and had another chapter of his own life with his like third wife and all of that. But Pocahontas, she at 10 years old, she allegedly saves John Smith's life, and 11 years later she's dead on a boat in England, being like converted and having all this crazy stuff happen to her.
I'm I'm a bit conflicted. Is this a sad life or not?
I don't know. And that's like the question that I want to talk about. Like, I am sad about it because I feel like that is that she was like taken advantage of because she was like kidnapped, and like had to marry this guy John because he like said he loved her, and like who knows if they really loved each other, because I don't know what she was thinking, and I have no evidence of what she was thinking. So maybe I'm an asshole and she was super excited and was like, this is exciting. I'm an explorer. Like I'm out here like doing these things that like only chiefs do because I'm talking with translating and talking to governors and doing all these things, and I'm learning, and I get to go across the ocean to these lands that we didn't even know existed. So like in one case maybe she's excited, but in another case maybe she's just like really taken advantage of and exploited as being the like an example of a person that they were able to convert to their ways, and this like romanticized figure, obviously, because we talk about her all the time as like someone who bridged that gap between the two vastly different cultures. But I don't know, did she want to? How did she feel? I have no idea. I wish she would have lived longer to tell us. I think that's the real tragedy for me, is that we don't have anything from her. We just have like the what people say about her, and they needed to have this like beautiful story to have it make sense.
I get a little bit of Patty Hearst vibes.
Mm-hmm. No, that totally makes sense. Like some Stockholm syndrome, like, oh yeah, I'm like now I'm on this guy's side, and all of that, because she had to like live with them and, you know, convert to all the things that they were doing. So she probably was like, yeah, no, I don't know, maybe thinks this is better. Like this is better for the world that you're here and doing this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting.
So
Yeah,
I don't
because
know.
the parallel universe, parallel timeline is she's not kidnapped for 9 years and she is allowed to. What a seminal moment though, that her friend
Mm-hmm.
asked her to go check out this ship. That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it
Yeah.
all happened. Like that is such a great example of a fork in a road that can actually derail your path.
Right. And for by all accounts, she didn't want to go. She was like, ugh, I don't want to go. And her friend was like, please come with me. Like, I need you to translate. I really am excited. And her friend sold her out and got her kidnapped and that started a lot of things. So yeah, I know she definitely didn't want to do that. Like that's documented. So maybe she didn't want to do any of it, you know? Maybe she
Yeah,
would still want to be married to Coco. Maybe they got divorced, but maybe they got divorced and they're still friends and they can just hang out. And
they
they
could
could
remarry. I
have
mean, they could have remarried.
they could have been married. Maybe she's someone who gets married 4 times, but 3 times of them is to Coco.
It's a lot of multiple marriages on our stories,
We know very little
so
about
it's
him, but I'm
plausible.
definitely pro Cocoam. Yeah, no, totally.
Okay,
Yeah,
let's. And now I see why the non-alcoholic drink is just standing outside and having the wind hit you.
yeah, it's colors of
Because
the wind.
when I picture Pocahontas, I rightly or wrongly picture the Disney cartoon of her just standing on a rock with wind blowing her hair back.
Leaves are like around her head. Yes, that's what we're thinking when we're outside, just kind of breathing in the world, and the last time that the world felt maybe safe for a 13, 10-year-old, possibly girl.
Yeah. Wow, awesome.
Yeah,
Very cool story, Taylor. Thank you for
thank you.
sharing. That was
I'm laughing because I'm like, one thing I was like, we need more banter, and also I'm like, that was not very funny. I feel like I need to put things in it. Because it's just a tragic story, but it's just interesting, and yeah, it's crazy. Go
it's
ahead.
fine. I mean, they're
Tell
not
me your
all gonna be the
story.
same. Yeah. So so
Hey everyone, thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed. We'll be back next week. We'll re-release part 2 of episode 3. And if you have any questions or ideas, please let us know. We're at doomtofailpod@gmail.com. We're on all socials at doomtofailpod, and also on Substack. You can find us there and subscribe to our newsletter. So every Friday I send out an email letting you know what we did each week. So the episodes that we put out, any re-releases, any interviews, anything cool that we have coming up. So get on that list so you don't miss an episode, and let us know if you have any feedback or questions. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you.